Hi there folks, welcome back to the IB9 Fishing channel. I hope you're doing really well. Please, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subs button somewhere down here. That way you'll be kept in touch with all the news, reviews, all the fishing, all the live streams and all the other stuff that IB and I get up to in this little corner of the internet. If you're a current subscriber, thank you very much for joining us again, much appreciated. We are back on the review train this week and we've got a really interesting product. I'm always looking for different stuff out there, both on the fly fishing and the lure fishing market. Stuff that's a little bit away from the normal, stuff that's got a little bit of ingenuity, something with a slightly different design. And this was something that I'd looked at and thought, yeah, I would love to have a look at one of those, because actually if they can get that right, that is a really cool idea. So I'm going to dip straight in on this one with while knocking the rod on the floor. So for the last about 2 months, if you guys have been watching the channel, you'd have noticed that I've been using one of the Wychwood Drift XL rods. This is a rod that extends from 9'6" at its normal length. You can add actually an extra 7 inches onto this rod. Now the idea of rods that you can add a little bit onto is absolutely nothing new at all. They've been around for years. There are loads of kind of multi-piece rods where you can just kind of keep adding bits onto them. What I really like about the Wychwood Drift, and this is the rod in question here, is the fact that that extension isn't stored in the butt down here like on some of the rods, but actually all you do with this is twist it and extend it. And on this rod, it gets you about another 7 inches. It isn't the full 8 inches that they say on the Wychwood game, it's about 7 inches. So you can take this from a 9'6" to a 10'1", literally just by twisting and pulling. And that for me is really, really cool, because it means that it's a really multifunctional rod. There's a lot you can do with this, and that's exactly how Wychwood have marketed. So what I'm going to go through is I'm going to go through exactly what the features of the rod are, and then talk about my experience of fishing with it, what I've done with it, just what I think this rod's going to bring to the market and to the people who buy one of these. So the rod I've got here is the 9'6" 3-weight, and there are 3 other rods in the market. There's a 9'6" 4-weight, there's a 9'6" 5-weight, and there's a 10.5" 3 to 4 weight. And these are all rods primarily designed for the river angler. These are river specific lengths and weights. These aren't rods that you're going to want to take on your local reservoir, your local big trout water. These are designed specifically for the river angler, and the actions and the feel and the features all designed around river fishing and running water applications. And in terms of those features, we'll start down here at the butt section, because there's usually more going on down here than anything else. First thing that kind of stands out about the rod is the funky looking cork. So this is kind of which we'll call it P cork. I'm not really sure what the P stands for, but which we'll call it P cork. It's some kind of composite. It is definitely cork, but you can tell it's a little bit different looking. I'll be honest, when I first got the rod, I first touched it, I was like, oh, I'm not sure about that. But actually, having fished with it now for a couple of months, it's really grown on me. It doesn't quite feel the same as normal cork. It is different, but I'm not going to say it's any worse, because actually I don't think it is. Once you've got used to the fact that it feels a bit different, actually it probably is a little bit more grippy than normal cork, and B, it's still really, really soft to the touch, even after having quite a battering in the last kind of 2 months. I've used this rod quite a lot, and it's still held its shape really well. There's nothing come out of it, even at the edges that aren't finished off with composite cork like you'd find on some other rods. Nothing has come off, everything's still in place, so big tick on that one. Really like the little kind of burned logo at the bottom there as well. I think that's pretty funky. This is going to be something we see more and more of in the future as the number of cork manufacturers producing rod quality cork reduces, which it is doing. Rod manufacturers are going to have to come up with more inventive ways of putting handles in rods. Some are using EVA foam and stuff like that. Some are using composite. If this is an indicator of the future of cork handles on fly rods, do you know what? I'm absolutely okay with it, because it was really nice to hold, really nice to fish with. Did all the same stuff as normal cork would do. So yeah, good on you, Wychwood. You did something different there, and actually it came off. Coming down a little bit, there's a nice kind of customy looking reel seat on there. It's got some branding on there, drilled out thing. It doesn't look like something that's straight off the shelf. It looks like something that's been designed. There's even a little branding down there on the very butt of the rod. So pretty cool looking, pretty funky looking, nice and lightweight. It's only a single locking ring. Sometimes that can be a problem, but actually this one never did come undone. I've had other rods where eventually a single locker starts to come undone and your reel falls off in the river. That hasn't happened on this, so again, big tick there for Wychwood. Coming a little bit further up, it is a very, very minimal rod from the top of the cork upwards. There's a little bit of branding there, but it literally just tells you what the rod is, the length and the line rating. There is no other information there. And in between there and the butt guide, there is a little glossy whip bit, which apparently is 20 centimeters from there to there, which is the minimum competition legal size of a fish. I must admit, I didn't know that. How useful that would be for most river anglers, I don't know, but they've put it on there. It's not really added or taken anything away from the rod, so whatever, that's absolutely fine. The blank is a really nice matte finish. I must admit, I geek out a little bit on matte finish rods. I much prefer a matte finish rod, but it's totally a personal preference thing. I'm not massively convinced how much of a difference rod flash is making for most UK fly fishing situations. The matte blank, I just think it looks really cool. We go further up the rod, and Wychwood have again kept the whippings really minimal. That's black whippings, little green tips to the whippings, very, very simple. And the guides on there, on this particular model, there's one stripper guide, and the rest of them are just single legs right the way through from the number 3 section to the tip ring. They're all single legs. There's no kind of additional snakes or anything on there. Nice and simple. Which would say actually that these are Pacific Bay guides, which is pretty cool actually. It means good quality stuff. Pac Bay makes some really good stuff. They'll find those on much more expensive rods than this. So big tick there for Wychwood again. It's fitted out properly. Blank's nice and slim, it's not too thick, it's not cumbersome, it's not particularly heavy. And while I couldn't find a stated weight anywhere on the Wychwood website, I've weighed it on the kitchen scales at around about 100 grams, which at this kind of price point for this type of rod is about right. It's no heavier or lighter than you'd expect it to be in that part of the marketplace. So straight away, you're starting to build up an idea. There's a pretty good package going on here. You do also get a decent quality Cordura tube with it, with a rod bag. And actually on the tube, you'll find a little label that gives a unconditional policy for warranty, which would say they can deliver sections, individual sections for the rod if anything gets broken at a cost of £25, included postage, to anywhere in the UK, hopefully within 7 days, which is fair enough actually. I don't think that's bad at all. 25 quid to get a new section of your rod within a week of breaking it. I'd take that. I think that's something that some other brands could look at actually. If everyone worked on a system like that, things would be a lot more simple. So again, good on Wychwood for that. But there's no doubt about the absolute blockbuster feature, and that's the one we're going to talk about as we go through talking about how I've fished with the rod, what I've done with it, and how it's worked. So I kind of looked at this and I was like, there are probably 2 different people who are looking at this rod, maybe 3. There'll be your out and out beginner who's looking for a lower end rod to kind of do a bit of everything with, to kind of have a play with. Don't want to overcommit and buy something really expensive and find out that river fishing is not for you. And then there are probably really, really fanatical dry fly anglers who are also looking for a rod that they could do a little bit of nymphing with. And there are probably really fanatical nymph anglers who are looking for a rod that they could do a little bit of dry fly fishing with. And I think that this rod is going to suit 2 of those 3 people absolutely perfectly. And that's what I'm going to talk about first, this rod in terms of what I've done with it for nymph fishing. I first got this rod during the Grayling season, and there was no doubt about it. The first thing I needed to do with it was go and do some Euro nymphing with it. And I've used 2 different Euro nymphing setups on this. Actually, one of them I don't think ever came out on a vlog because I had a pretty hard day's fishing. But I used my normal 9-meter French leader, and I spent some time using a Euro Nymphing fly line as well. You guys will know I'm not a massive fan of Euro Nymphing fly lines, but I did try it just for the review. And you know what? Actually, it performed really, really well. First session I had with it, I must admit I bumped a couple off it. It's slightly stiffer than the normal 10-foot 2-way that I use, so I bumped a couple of small Grayling off. But once I got used to the extra power in the blank, yeah, absolutely fine. It fished really, really nicely. And as I say, having the ability to go from 9.5 to just over 10 was really cool. Particularly actually when I was doing some small stream fishing, because there are some areas on a small stream where 10 foot is just too much, but being able to take 7 inches off that was really, really handy, and it worked. And during the day, I did actually find myself, telescoping and untelescoping the rod repeatedly. One of my big fears when I first looked at this was whether the blank was going to roll once you've pulled it out, or even once you've got it in. I was worried that the blank was going to move during casting and stuff, but it hasn't, which has been really cool. I thought it was going to like twist around and the line would get twisted around the blank. It's actually stayed still for the whole time, which was my big worry, my big fear. Caught plenty of fish on it, gave it a good bend, both trout and grayling at that point, few out-season trout, plenty of decent grayling. It performed pretty well with pretty much everything. Although I will say there was one thing that came up, and I think possibly this will be the one thing that I think holds this rod back as a nymphing rod. It's not necessarily as applicable as a dry fly rod, but as a nymphing rod, it was a little bit of an issue, and I'm just going to talk about that very, very quickly. So I'm just going to have a quick look at this. So that currently is at its kind of 9.5 foot 3-weight setting. The handle hasn't been telescoped out. It's all kind of sat where it is. At that, it looks like a pretty normal rod. You can see the end of the handles there, guides up here. There's a little bit of distance in between there, but because you're going to use it as a dry fly rod as well, you'd expect that that butt ring wouldn't be too close to the handle. You guys will know as if you're doing an nymphing, the closer you can get that butt ring to the handle, the better line management you've got, and it will reduce sag. So I'm just going to bring in for a second the rod that I normally use for my Euro nymphing, which is my Scierra Brook 10-foot 2-weight. And if I put those both there, the handles are level. The butt rings are in pretty much the same place. The Wychwood might be slightly further up the blank, but not much, so no great complaints about that. I'm just going to bring in another rod. Now this is a specialist kind of European style nymphing rod that we're going to be doing a review on really soon. I'm just going to park the brook for a second. I'm going to put these two together, and I've actually only got the butt section of this rod in my hand, and you can see the guide is way further down the blank. Now this is a specific kind of European style nymphing rod. I'm not expecting every rod to look like this. So not too much fault there at the 9.5 foot setting. When you telescope that out and you add the extra 7 inches, I'm going to bring the brook back in now. Now I've got both of the butts on the floor. You can see there is now a big difference between where the guides sit on these two rods. And the reason that's important is if you're using long light leaders for Euro nymphing, if you're using a Euro nymphing line, the more distance you have between your butt guide and your reel, the more line sag you're going to get down here. And I found particularly with the Euro nymphing line, it was quite a windy day and there was a huge amount of line sag here, which was reducing the amount of feel I could get through the drift. And don't get me wrong, this is a really, really specific problem and you've got to really geek out in your Euro nymphing to be able to appreciate this, I think. Don't get me wrong, it's not the end of the world, you know, it still worked perfectly well. I caught lots of fish on it, but from a real techie specky kind of thing, the distance between the butt guide and the distance between the reel, I think could have been less. And I think possibly I'd have been tempted if I'd have been Wychwood to put that butt guide right down on the bottom of the joint, which would have meant it was a wee bit close at the 9'6" setting that we can see there. But I think at the 10 foot setting, it would have fished slightly better. I'd say real techie thing. It'll only matter if you're fishing in particularly high winds or if you're fishing, as I said, the Euro nymphing line in particular was an issue. In terms of sensitivity while you're nymphing, I must admit, I'm not a Euro nymphing angler who really fishes by feel. I'm using my indicator primarily. This probably isn't as sensitive as, say, the top-end Euro nymphing rod that we're about to make a review on. Possibly not quite as sensitive as the brook. But this can do things that the brook can't, in that it can change its length instantaneously. And as I say, as someone who doesn't fish kind of a touch style of Euro nymphing, I'm more visual on my indicator. It really didn't matter to me. It's also the rod that I filmed the micro streamers vlog with. And again, just being able to make those bow and arrows and think, oh, I'm a little bit short with that, I'll pull this out a little bit. And then make it again and just get the extra distance. Again, that paid off a few times during that day. So in terms of Euro nymphing, do you know what? It's pretty hard to give it too much criticism. It did everything I asked of it. At £150, just as a nymph rod, it would be a very good rod. But obviously you get added value with this, with the ability to throw a fly line with it, which is what I'm going to talk about next. Now, obviously, once we got into the trout season, I've also been able to spend some time dry fly fishing with the Drift XL. And actually, this is where I think it really comes into its own. Obviously, by this point, I'd had quite a lot of time fishing it on the Grayling season, during the Grayling season, fishing Euro nymphing techniques and stuff like that. So I was getting to know the rod. My big worry about this going into throwing fly line was that it's quite soft. And I was a little bit worried it's going to be too soft. It's not. It handled it really well. I actually think this is a really good dry fly rod. I genuinely think this is a good dry fly rod. And at £150, if this was just a 9'6" free weight dry fly rod, I would still think it's worth the money. At short to medium distances, it was brilliant. Really nice, ever so smooth. I could be accurate with it. It roll cast really nicely. I've tried a couple of different lines with it. I've gone with the Wychwood feather down floater. I must admit I've used 4s and not 3s, so you have to take that into account a little bit. I tend to overline my rods, and I did overline this one. Really nice line. It didn't quite suit the way I fish. I like to throw really long leaders, particularly on the Derbyshire Wye where the fish are a little bit fly line scary. So it wasn't the line I opted for in the end, but actually for most normal fishing situations, if you're throwing 12-foot leaders, normal monofilament tapered leaders, absolutely fine. The line that I've opted for this season so far, and I've really enjoyed using it, is the Arctic Silver Compact Floater 2.0, which is a 30-foot head. It's a heavy line. Again, this is a 4-weight with a 10-gram head, so it is a lot heavier than this rod's designed for. But it helps me throw over the long leaders that I like to use really efficiently. So I've been using that. At short to medium range, up to about 40 feet, and we're talking 40 feet of fly line there, probably have between 15 and 20 feet of leader on the end of that. It coped with it perfectly. What you have to do is just back the power down a little bit. I did find if I really tried to hit this hard, and that's me casting badly, not the rod, but if I did try and hit this a bit harder, I would flex the rod a little bit too hard. I'd cast a few tail and loops. It always takes a little while to get used to a new dry fly rod, and this was no different, but once I'd figured out where the zone is on this thing, I was seriously accurate with it. Both at short and fairly long range, I was throwing casts, I've thrown the fly up to about 60 feet at points, up against the far bank, and again, it coped with it really well. So big tick there in terms of the dry fly fishing. I will say, once again, there were situations, particularly on the Derbyshire Wye where we can't wade, where you'd make a cast and the line at the rod tip was causing drag because the river was pushing it away. just being able to grab that extra 7 inches out of the handle, make the same cast, all of a sudden you could reach over those inside flow lines. You could avoid that drag. You could get yourself in a position where you could catch a fish without having to worry too much about the drag at the rod end of the system. So again, big tick for that, really, really cool. In terms of reels, I've put a couple of different reels on it. I started off with the Wychwood River and Stream 4-5. I mean, this reel's been out for probably approaching 10 years now. It's become a bit of a design classic, to be honest. You guys have seen this. If you're anywhere near a UK fly fishing shop, you'll know the reel. They've done it in a black colour now. I think there's a gunmetal as well. It looks really cool. I had the original gold one. I think I was one of the first people in the UK to get the gold one when it first came out, and I loved that reel. This is no different. It's really, really lightweight. I must admit, I am a bit of a rod balancer. I do like to have an outfit that's balanced, and I found that this was a little bit too lightweight to balance the rod. But if you're not a balancer, if it's not a thing for you, if you're just looking for lightweight, that'll be absolutely spot on. As ever, in the end, I kind of plumped for the Scierra Traxion 1 34LW, the reel that I use on pretty much all my rods, to be honest. It's just become my kind of go-to. And I'm just going to put these sections together on here very quickly and show you why it is that I went for this reel. Ooh, big stretch. So that's at its 9.5 foot setting. If I just put 3 fingers on the handle there, you can see that is balanced pretty much perfectly. There's a Nymph fly nail on at the moment. I know there's no fly line through the rod, but it's pretty much balanced perfectly with that Nymph line on there. Then if I pull the handle out, it gets a little bit tip heavy. You see, I'm having to adjust my fingers slightly further up the cork, but that's still not bad, folks. I mean, that's pretty good. To give you an idea, the reel there with the Nymphing line and the backing on there is just about 200 grams. So if you've got one of these rods or are looking to get one of these rods and you want a reel that's going to balance it absolutely perfectly, so you haven't got to grip the rod really hard, particularly while you're Nymphing, about 200 grams at this end is going to balance the rod really, really nicely. I said at the start of this, I thought there are going to be 3 different types of people who would look at buying this rod, and I'm going to go through each one of those 3 individually. So your absolute beginner who's looking at getting into it, doesn't want to spend too much. For 150 quid, you're essentially getting 2 rods in one. You're getting a really, really nice dry fly rod that's going to do all that stuff perfectly well. If you want a chalk stream, if you want the extra length that the 9.5 foot gives you, that's a really nice rod, and because it's got that nice mellow action, it's going to be easy to cast. It's going to be a great rod to learn with. You'll get years of service out of that. So if you're a beginner looking at a new rod and you're in that kind of 150 quid price range, yeah, highly recommended. This is something I'd go for, particularly as it's backed up with that really cool warranty. I also said that there would be dry fly anglers who might be looking for a rod to do a little bit of Euro nymphing with, and again, this is going to be great for you guys. As I've already talked about, there is one particular limitation with this rod as a European style nymphing rod with how far that guide ends up from the reel. If you're only going to Euro nymph occasionally, then it's not going to be an issue. Don't worry about it. You don't need to buy a second rod. You could buy this one rod and it would do both things for you. If you are a really fanatical Euro nympher who wants a rod that's going to do a little bit of dry fly fishing, I don't think this is the rod for you, because of that one limitation. If you're a real fanatical Euro nympher, you'll already understand what I mean about the position of that first guide. So yeah, of those 3, I think it's going to suit 2 of you absolutely perfectly, particularly as a first rod for a beginner. This is a really, really nice dry fly rod that you could also do some duo with. You could fish it with North Country spiders and stuff like that. It's versatile. There's so much you can do with it. So my verdict on this is, yeah, big thumbs up. Props to Wychwood. Really, really nice piece of kit. Very impressed. A great idea. They've followed through into what is a great final product. Really, really enjoyed using it. All of the kit, including the rod that I've talked about in this vlog, I will try and put links for in the description below. There'll be affiliate links. You guys know what that means. It means we get a little percentage of the cut on the sale. If you buy anything through affiliate links, we always appreciate that, and it doesn't cost you anything at all. Please do in the comment section, let us know what you think of the review. Let us know if you've already got one of these or if you've used one. Let us know what you think. Also, let us know if you were looking at getting a new rod for the trout season this year and this might have swayed you or possibly made you want to have a closer look at the Drift XL range. As I say, there's 4 rods in there. There's something for pretty much every running water angler going. You can get more information on the Wychwood Game website. Folks, I reckon that's this review about done. Thank you very much for sticking with us and watching the review. Really appreciate it. Let us know in the comment section what you think, and I will be back again soon with more vlogs, more fishing, more reviews and more stuff. Take care, folks. Bye bye.